happening with Charlie Kirk isn't new. The US media has had a long, shameful habit of chalking up white supremacists to just concerned characters, colorful characters, instead of the threats to human rights that they are. The media has had a long history of sanitizing, softening, and even glamorizing white supremacists. I'm Renita Shannon. I served 6 years in the Georgia House of Representatives, and this is House Politics, the channel where we connect the dots between history and today's headlines to better understand tomorrow. We do this all while tackling DIY house projects. So what we'll be working on today is we will be upgrading the outlets in your house. I'm going to show you how to take a basic, simple outlet and turn it into an outlet that can actually help you get a lot more done. So we'll be installing these USB-C and regular USB port outlets. It's a simple project, but as always, if you don't feel like this is something that you want to tackle, consult a professional. So the first thing we're going to do is take the cover off of the old outlet. Make sure you've already turned off the power in your house. You don't ever want to do electrical projects with the power on. So as we do this, let's jump into Charlie Kirk. Now listen, I've already told y'all why I don't give a damn about Charlie Kirk or his mama. And that's because Charlie Kirk espoused the same values that had white people sleeping good every night in this country with black folks enslaved. These are the same values that had white folks taking their kids to lynchings on Sunday as entertainment after church. And it's the same values that had white folks using up black babies as alligator bait. And if you don't believe me, look it up. So for me, Charlie Kirk don't mean nothing to me. But let's talk about what's happening right now, because there seems to be a big divide over how the legacy of Charlie Kirk should be covered. And many people are saying that they believe it should be covered as is. And many people are saying that, you know, there's no reason to celebrate Charlie Kirk. And I agree. Well, you can see right now from the divide that America is very invested in protecting its whiteness. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to disconnect, not completely disconnect, but just pull the wires away from the old outlet that was in the wall. And this is where the pliers come in, because these wires can be stubborn and hard to pull away by hand. And sometimes they can even be a little sharp. So you want to get some pliers to kind of help you pull it instead of just using your hand. And just like that, we've pulled away the first wire, okay? What you're going to find two on each side. And we'll talk about the different colors and what they mean a little later. But let's talk about how the media has had a habit of sanitizing white supremacists and their activities. Here's the pattern. The media repeatedly normalizes white supremacy by just treating it as legitimate politics. And so this refers to, you've heard a lot of people say about Charlie Kirk, oh, he was just somebody with different political views. Why does he have to be demonized? Not even thinking about the harm that he was doing. Kirk made statements about gay people, black people, women. I mean, pretty much anybody who was not a white man, he had negative things to say about them, or anybody who was not white, he had negative things to say. So now it's time to undo the other side. So let's continue the pattern and talk about what the media does. We've already talked about the fact that they normalize white supremacy by just treating it as legitimate politics. The second thing they like to do is the media likes to humanize the person who is spreading all the hate, the white supremacists. And then they downplay the humanity, and a lot of times don't even mention the humanity of the victims that the white supremacists are spreading hateful ideas about. So what this looks like is, a lot of folks are seeing this now in media. Folks are just talking about, oh, Charlie Kirk was a good Christian man, while not even showing or talking about how vile his rhetoric was. And that's why you have some people saying, oh, I don't even know what did Charlie Kirk say that was hateful? People literally don't even know what this man said that was hateful. And I'm not going to repeat the comments, because this is not a channel where we are going to spread hate, especially not against black folks, which Charlie Kirk literally, when he was shot, was spreading hate against trans folks, and also talking shit about black folks, which he regularly does, which he would regularly do. So I'm not going to repeat any of that, but like I said, you can Google it. The last thing that the media does as a part of this pattern of sanitizing white supremacy is that they use euphemisms like states' rights, calling people a populist, alt-right, or just call these characters provocative instead of naming exactly what it is, which is white supremacist ideology. And that's why I say America works very hard to protect its whiteness. Okay, so we almost got this wire off. Okay, you just want to slide it out. There we go. So let's go from the Klan to Kirk. In the 1920s, during the Ku Klux Klan revival, newspapers like the New York Times and the Chicago Tribune ran glowing coverage of Klan parades. They ran glowing coverage of Klan membership drives, often describing them as patriotic defenders of American morality rather than violent terrorists. And we all know that the KKK existed to inflict racial terror, mostly on Black people. But the newspapers were just calling this stuff, membership drives, saying that they were advancing family values. They even published puff pieces about Klan weddings and wholesome picnics. Like, that's the kind of way that the newspaper was referring to what the Ku Klux Klan was doing, all while downplaying the lynchings and the terror campaigns that the Ku Klux Klan was engaging in. And here's an example of a New York Times, 1921 New York Times headline. The headline read, "Ku Klux Klan assails lawlessness." So they would even make comments, and I've still heard people say this today. I served with a legislator who literally said that the KKK was not so much of a terror group, but they were just a law and order group. Like, are you kidding me? Okay, so now we got all the wires out, and that's great. Okay, so here's what I want to show you. These two wires are the black wires because they have black insulation around them. So these two are going to stick together, and they're going to go on the brass side of the new outlet. And I'll show you when I say brass side, I mean there's a brass screw. So I'll show that to you. These two wires are white wires because they have white insulation around them. And then this wire that has no insulation, this is just white paint that you see. This wire that has no insulation is your grounding wire, and that goes on the bottom of the outlet on the green screw. Okay, so back to the Klan. As I mentioned before, I literally served with somebody who talked like a segregationist politician. So you have figures like George Wallace and folks like that. They were often framed in the press as defenders of tradition or standing up for states' rights. And all this was just softening the explicitly racist core of their platform. And then you had the white citizen councils, which the media frequently called them respectable, or, the businessmen's Klan, portraying them as polite civic organizations instead of economic enforcers of segregation and racial terror, which they were. Okay, so actually, I told you how hard it is to wrap these wires back around the screws when it's time to install the new outlet. But what we're going to do is actually a different type of insulation. Let's save ourselves some headache. So I've never done this type of insulation before. I've only ever done it the hard way, which is trying to wrap them back around. But some of these newer outlets actually have a different way that you can do it. So the colors still match with what I told you before, but you see these little holes that are right there adjacent to the screw. I'm going to try and point to it. There's two holes on the side of the brass screw, and then there's two holes right here on the side of the silver screw. what you can do is, instead of wrapping the wires around the screws of the new outlet, these outlets, since they have these holes, you can just straighten out the wires and then stick them directly into the outlet. So that's what we're going to do, because I think that's a lot easier than trying to wrap them around the screw. As I prepare the wires, I'm going to start straightening them out so they can be stuck into the outlet. We're going to talk about how the media covered the civil rights era as it relates to sanitizing white supremacy in the media. So during the civil rights era, you had segregationist politicians who basically believed that, you know, Black people were a underclass, should be treated like second class citizens, and everything needed to be segregated, even though Black people were contributing, paying taxes, and paying for these public resources. You had folks who believed that Black folks should just not get to use all the public facilities like we can today, even though our tax dollars are paying for it. So during this time, you had figures like George Wallace, who his motto was segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. So this guy was a committed, racist, committed segregationist. But in the newspapers, he was often framed by the press as defenders of tradition. So instead of them saying, okay, this guy is talking about, let's just have segregation, even though Black folks are paying taxes just like white people are for these public resources, this guy is a traditionalist, is what they would call him. Or they would say, oh, he's just standing up for states' rights. Does that sound familiar? Because we still hear that today. Oh, these conservatives are just people who believe in states' rights. Okay. Yeah, right. So, but the effect that this had was that it was softening the explicitly racist core of their platform, like what they were talking about. It was just softening it, sanitizing it, just making it seem not as bad. Okay, so also during this time, you have the White Citizens Council. And the media often portrayed the White Citizens Councils as just like, oh, the businessman's Klan, or they would call them just polite civic organizations instead of economic enforcers of segregation. And they would never talk about the racial terror that these councils enforced. So after the civil rights era, you had figures, which I'm sure some of you will remember, like David Duke. So this was like in the 80s and the 90s. David Duke was the former KKK Grand Wizard, and he was given endless mainstream media praise. Like they would say things like, oh, he's so charismatic, he's handsome, he's articulate. I mean, they would just literally talk about this guy like he was a rock star. And the outlets were obsessed with just saying, oh, he's just politically savvy. And basically, they were just glossing over his hardcore white supremacist ideology. Like, this guy is literally the leader of the Klan. And they're like, oh, yeah, he's so charismatic and so good looking. In the 90s, okay, so now you see we've got all of the wires straight now. So Pat Buchanan was somebody in the 90s who ran an openly nativist, xenophobic presidential campaign. And what did the mainstream media do with him? They called him a populist, a patriot, and they even framed his far-right rallies as colorful expressions of working class discontent. Does that sound familiar? Yes, I'm sure it does to many of you. Okay, so like we said before, the black wires are going to go on the brass side screw. Okay, so I've got the two black wires installed on the right side of the outlet, and then I also tightened the screw on the outside, and that's what keeps them in place. So now we're going to do the other side. Okay, so now we're doing the other side. We're just going to stick the white wires in the holes that are provided. And we're going to talk about how we still are seeing as late as 2017, how white supremacist violence gets covered. Remember the Charlottesville Unite the Right coverage? So in the Remember that was a march where you had all of the white men marching and they were shouting, "Jews will not replace us." And then, and that was when you started to hear more about the great replacement theory. So that was at Charlottesville March. And you had that white woman, Heather Heyer, actually die at that march. But the way that the media covered it was just completely ridiculous. So after the rally happened, there were stories like the New York Times had one called "A Voice of Hate in America's Heartland." And this story actually profiled, now we're just going to tighten the screw, okay, to keep the wires locked in. So this story actually profiled a neo-Nazi, and they basically talked about things like, oh, you know, he's just a sweet Midwesterner, quirky Midwesterner guy. He likes pasta and Seinfeld. And so, you know, talking about this type of stuff in print and in media is once again a great way to humanize these folks while downplaying the real damage that they are having. I mean, at this rally, literally Heather Heyer lost her life. And they're talking about how one of the neo-Nazis involved liked pasta and Seinfeld. Like, give me a break. Are these people serious? They also often called it a clash of extremes. Yeah, I don't think so. So, and I'm not just picking on the New York Times here, but because, you know, quite a few of the examples have been the New York Times. But the point I'm making is that when you have that sort of, you know, reach, your coverage and the way you cover things really matters. So it's just inappropriate for the New York Times, which is one of the largest newspapers in the country, to be covering things in such a sanitized way when these movements are doing real harm. Okay. So now for this final screw, remember we said the grounding wire, which is the one that does not have insulation, has to go around the green screw. So now we're going to actually place this around the green screw and then tighten it, and then we'll be ready to kind of reassemble it. So now that we've got all the wires in, and the grounding wire is below, wrapped around the green screw, and then we tightened it, let's go ahead and test this to make sure that it's working before we put the cover back on. Okay, so we're going to test it now that I've turned the power back on, to make sure that this works. Okay, and it works. What I did was I just plugged my iPhone into it to see if it would charge, and we do have power, so that's perfect. All right, so now that we know that it works, I'm going to go ahead and just put the cover on, and we're going to finish up talking about what's happening today with the Kirk treatment, I'll call it, that the media is giving Charlie Kirk. So major media outlets and celebrities now are trying to characterize Charlie Kirk as like the model for free speech. And people have said things like, oh, he's doing it the right way. You see, this is how it should be done. And he was just a good Christian man. So once again, like I said, this is the pattern that media and celebrities, often celebrities are getting involved now. But this is the pattern that we usually see from media, where they try to sanitize and humanize folks who are just raging white supremacists, while never even talking about the harm that these people create. And so really, you know, referring to people like Charlie Kirk and Tucker Carlson as just far-right influencers, or people who are just provocative and controversial, and, you know, conservative commentators, all that's doing is just flattening white nationalist rhetoric into just like, you know, another side of the political spectrum. Like, that's what it's really doing. It's really just flattening what is white supremacist rhetoric into just, oh, a different side of the debate. And that's garbage, because their words have real impacts on communities. All right, so we've almost got everything back ready to go. And like I said, we got to use a different cover because this is a square outlet. So I'm actually going to choose a gold outlet. So I think it looks good with the black. And then we will screw in the top 2 screws, the top and bottom screw, and then we'll be done. So this is our final product after we've reassembled the outlet. And thanks for tuning in. Send me your questions. Let me know what you think about this pattern with the media and sanitizing white supremacy. Until next time, this is House Politics.